By 8:17 that night, the video had already passed 2 million views. It showed two hotel security guards holding a black woman by both arms in the marble lobby of the Sterling Crest Manhattan, while a silver-haired general manager stood in front of her and told her in a voice calm enough to feel cold that she was no longer welcome on the property. What the phone camera did not show was the locked briefcase sitting less than 3 feet away, holding an acquisition contract that had been signed at 5 o'clock that afternoon. It did not show the hidden clause that could cost that general manager his job, his $1.8 million retention bonus, and the reputation he had spent 30 years polishing. And it certainly did not show the old file buried deep inside the hotel's archives, the one with Calvin Monroe's name on it, a bellman who had been pushed out of this very building because he refused to lie for a VIP guest. So when Preston Vale looked at the woman being dragged toward the revolving doors and said, "People like you always think the rules don't apply," he believed he was ending a problem. He had no idea he had just failed the final test. And he had no idea the woman he was throwing out had bought the entire Sterling Crest Hotel group just 2 hours earlier. 90 minutes before that, Ariel Monroe walked into the hotel alone. She did not arrive with security, a driver holding an umbrella, or the kind of entourage that makes front desk staff straighten their backs before a guest even says her name. Ariel wore a tailored camel jacket, cream wide-leg trousers, a soft black sweater, and spotless white sneakers. On her wrist was a thin gold watch, quiet enough for most people to miss, but expensive enough for anyone in finance to recognize immediately. That was exactly how Ariel wanted to enter the Sterling Crest Manhattan, without a title, without advance notice, and without Power walking in ahead of her to clear the room. For 3 months, she had quietly negotiated the purchase of the Sterling Crest Hotel Group, a historic luxury chain with 42 properties in 11 countries. On paper, it was the largest hotel real estate deal of the year. But to Ariel, the Manhattan property was not just a beautiful asset in the middle of the city. It was the place where her father had worn a bellman's uniform for nearly 30 years, carried luggage for people who never bothered to learn his name, and then been forced out after an incident her family never forgot. Inside the acquisition contract was a clause Ariel had insisted on adding at the last minute, the final dignity audit. Before the old management team could be retained and receive their transition bonuses, the flagship hotel had to pass a secret review of how it treated guests and employees. If it failed, the new owner had the right to immediately suspend any executive involved, cancel retention bonuses, open a civil rights audit, and preserve all camera footage, complaint records, and internal reports. Preston Vale knew an inspection was coming sometime that week. He did not know who the inspector was. Ariel knew exactly what she was looking for. She stopped in the lobby and looked toward the wall beside the concierge desk. Years earlier, that wall had displayed photographs of longtime employees, housekeepers, chefs, front desk clerks, bellmen. In her memory, her father stood in the middle of the second row, wearing his Navy uniform, white gloves folded over one hand, his smile tired but proud. That photograph was gone. In its place were portraits of former executives, most of them white men in dark suits, men who had owned or managed the hotel but had never spent 12 hours standing in the lobby, never had to smile after being called the wrong name, and never carried a suitcase for someone who looked down on them. Ariel studied the wall for a few more seconds, then walked to the front desk. "Good evening," the young woman behind the counter said with a carefully trained smile. Checking in, Ariel set her small bag on the counter. "Reservation under Monroe." The front desk clerk typed the name into the system. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes shifted slightly as if a door had closed somewhere inside her mind. Ariel had seen that look in too many places. Expensive restaurants, jewelry stores, airport lounges, penthouses, quietly offered only to qualified buyers. It was the moment someone looked at her, looked at the screen, and decided something did not match. "Ma'am, are you sure the reservation is under Monroe?" "Yes." "Could it be under a company name or someone else in your party?" "No." "Ariel Monroe." The clerk typed again, longer than necessary this time. "I do see the reservation. It's for the presidential suite." "That's right." Her eyes moved over Ariel's small bag, her sneakers, her camel jacket. Not openly enough to be called rude, not harsh enough to be reported, but enough for Ariel to understand that the real test had already begun. "I'll need to verify the payment method." Ariel took out a black card and placed it on the counter. The clerk accepted it with both hands, ran it once, then ran it again before leaning toward the monitor with a soft performance of confusion. "There seems to be a delay in the verification system. With high-value reservations, sometimes we need to run an additional check. Then call someone who can check it. The clerk looked up, her cheeks warming slightly, then picked up the phone. In the office behind the lobby, Preston Vale was standing in front of a mirror adjusting his tie. Everything had to be perfect that night. Margot Sinclair, a longtime VIP guest, was hosting a pre-wedding event for her daughter and demanding use of the presidential suite for private photographs. She was not just a difficult guest. She chaired an elite charity foundation, had ties to two members of the old executive board, and the Sinclair family's winter gala was worth nearly $5 million. If Preston kept Margot happy, he would have a beautiful number to present to the secret new owner. The old money clientele still trusted him. If he lost Margot, he lost a shield. If the hotel failed the inspection, he lost $1.8 million. And if anyone reopened the civil rights complaints that had been quietly downgraded over the years, he could lose far more than his job. When the front desk called about a woman named Monroe holding the presidential suite, Preston saw a quick solution. A guest alone with no entourage, no lawyer beside her, and nothing that matched what he privately considered a premium profile. In his mind, Margot Sinclair was value. Ariel Monroe was risk. He walked into the lobby wearing a soft smile and cold eyes. "Good evening." Preston rested both hands on the edge of the counter, his voice warm enough to sound like service. "I'm Preston Vale, the general manager. I understand there may be a slight issue with your reservation." Ariel looked directly at him. "There is no issue. I booked the presidential suite, I paid for it, and I would like my key." "Of course. We simply have to protect the experience of our highest-tier guests. Occasionally, a reservation appears in the system incorrectly." "Incorrectly? It happens more often than you might think." Ariel tilted her head slightly. "I'm sure it does." From the elevator side of the lobby, Margot Sinclair approached in a cream fur-trimmed coat, her face tight from a long day of performing elegance. Behind her walked her daughter, a young woman who looked exhausted and embarrassed after watching her mother pressure the staff all afternoon. Preston, Margot said, not looking at Ariel, only at the manager, as if he were the only person in the room with authority. "I hope this is being handled. The photographer will be here in 40 minutes. Preston turned immediately. "I'm finding the best solution, Mrs. Sinclair." Only then did Margot look at Ariel. Her eyes traveled from Ariel's face to her sneakers and lingered there longer than they needed to. "This is the person holding the suite." Ariel did not wait for Preston. "Yes." Margot gave a small laugh, not because anything was funny, but because she was used to using laughter to put people back in their place. "My family has stayed at this hotel for more than 20 years. We host events here every season, and tonight my daughter needs that suite. I'm sure you understand how important that is. I understand the room is reserved under my name." Margot's daughter looked down at the floor. Preston realized the situation was deteriorating, but instead of protecting the correct procedure, he chose to protect the relationship that benefited him more. "Ms. Monroe," his smile thinned, "I can place you in an executive room on the 32nd floor. Very quiet, recently renovated. We would also be happy to include breakfast and spa access." "You're asking me to give up the room I paid for because she wants it." Preston lowered his voice as though offering her one last chance to play the role he had assigned her. "I'm asking you to cooperate and be reasonable on an important evening for the hotel." Ariel let the silence stretch just long enough. "No." One word changed the air around the front desk. Margot looked at her as if she had heard a foreign language. Preston did not lose his smile, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. "I'm sorry, I will not give up my room." Margot turned fully toward Preston, speaking loudly enough for several nearby guests to hear. This hotel used to understand the difference between a guest and a problem. Preston heard the signal clearly. If he did not handle Ariel, Margot would make him the problem. He also knew that if Ariel filed an official complaint in the system, tonight's incident could become part of the inspection he was trying to survive. The safest move, according to Preston's logic, was to remove her from the lobby before she could become documentation. A young bellman pushed a luggage cart closer. His name tag read Darius Bennett. He did not interrupt loudly. He simply placed a glass of water on the counter near Ariel. "Ma'am, would you like some water while you wait?" Preston snapped his head toward him. "Darius, return to your station." Darius paused, but his eyes stayed on Ariel with a very ordinary kindness. That was what made her throat tighten. Her father used to say that in the most luxurious places, real decency often came from the people paid the least. "Thank you," Ariel said softly. "How long have you worked here? 3 years. Do you like it?" Darius glanced at Preston, then chose an answer honest enough to be real and careful enough to be safe. "I like the people who work here." Ariel almost smiled. That's a wise answer. Darius looked toward the photo wall in the lobby where the portraits of executives hung in a straight line. My grandmother used to work in housekeeping here. She told me about a bellman named Calvin Monroe. She said he walked female employees to the train station after late shifts remembered everybody's birthday and never let a guest take away his dignity. They used to have his picture in the employee hallway, but it was taken down a long time ago. Ariel went still. For a few seconds, the sound of rain outside and glasses clinking at the bar seemed to fall away. Preston stepped closer, his voice lower now but sharper. Darius, if you want to keep working here after tonight, I suggest you walk away. Darius bit his lip, but did not immediately take his eyes off Ariel. He had just realized he had said something important even if he did not yet know how important. Margot ran out of patience. Preston, I don't have time to watch staff tell family stories in the lobby. My daughter has an entire photography team waiting. Ariel turned to her. Do you know why Calvin Monroe's photograph was removed? Margot frowned. I have no idea who that is. I do. Preston spoke too quickly, then immediately realized he had revealed a piece of the past. He corrected his tone. A former employee, a very old internal matter. You call a man losing his job because he refused to lie in internal matter. Preston's eyes darkened. He understood now that the woman in front of him was not merely a difficult guest. She knew too much. 22 years earlier, the drunk son of a VIP guest had shoved a housekeeper in a service hallway. She injured her shoulder, but the family threatened to sue if their name appeared in the report. The hotel needed a witness to sign a statement saying the housekeeper had slipped on her own. Calvin Monroe, the only person who saw what happened, refused to sign. Preston, then an assistant manager desperate to climb the ladder, signed the recommendation to terminate Calvin for violating guest confidentiality protocol and creating legal exposure for the hotel. No one said Calvin had lied. They simply said he was no longer aligned with the brand culture. Ariel had lived with the consequences of that phrase for years. Preston did not want that story spoken in the lobby, especially now that several guests had begun raising their phones. Ms. Monroe, he said, returning to his service voice, though his eyes had lost all softness. I'm asking you to leave the front desk area. We will contact you once verification is complete. I have a confirmed reservation. Not anymore. The front desk clerk looked up sharply, but Preston's glance silenced her. Ariel held his stare. Before you have someone drag me through that door, you should ask yourself whether this is service or evidence. Preston did not understand or did not want to. He raised his hand and called security. Two guards approached, their faces uncomfortable but obedient. Darius stepped half a pace forward. Mr. Vale, she hasn't done anything wrong. Preston did not turn. One more word and you'll be suspended before the shift is over. Darius stopped, his hand tightening around the handle of the luggage cart. One guard lightly touched Ariel's arm. Ma'am, please come with us. Ariel did not pull away, raise her voice, or do anything Preston could label as out of control. She simply looked around the lobby where polite faces pretended not to watch while phones quietly recorded everything. All right, she said. Let the hotel speak for itself. The two guards held her by both arms and walked her toward the revolving doors. Margot exhaled with relief as if an object out of place had finally been removed. Preston followed close enough to control the scene, but far enough away not to look like the one using force. Outside, 3 black cars pulled up to the curb. The first door opened. Celeste Ward stepped out beneath a black umbrella, wearing a navy suit, followed by 3 attorneys carrying thick files. She entered the lobby, saw the guards holding Ariel, and stopped. The silence on her face was sharper than any shout. Take your hands off the person conducting this hotel's final dignity audit. The guards froze. Preston frowned. Who are you? Celeste did not look at him right away. She waited for Ariel to free her arms and smooth her sleeve. Only then did Celeste open the locked briefcase. I'm Celeste Ward, legal counsel for Ariel Monroe. At 5 o'clock this afternoon, Ms. Monroe completed the acquisition of the Sterling Crest Hotel Group. As of that moment, she became the controlling shareholder and acting chair of the company. A thick silence fell over the lobby. Someone at the front desk let out a small breath. Darius looked at Ariel as if every missing piece had just fallen into place. Margot went pale while Preston fought to maintain the composure of a man who knew he was being filmed. There has clearly been a misunderstanding, he said, turning toward Ariel, his voice already lighter than before. If you had informed us in advance, you would have prepared a better performance, Ariel said, not sharply but firmly. I didn't come here to see how you treat power. I came to see how you treat someone who doesn't appear to have any. Celeste placed a document on the counter. Under the final dignity audit clause, the conduct that just occurred constitutes an immediate failure by on-site management, stripping a lawful guest of her room, using security to pressure her off the property without cause, favoring another VIP guest against procedure, and creating a public discrimination risk in front of witnesses. Preston's jaw tightened. That clause cannot be triggered over one misunderstanding. It isn't one incident. Celeste handed over a second file. This is a summary of 43 complaints over the last 5 years that were downgraded from discrimination complaint to service misunderstanding. This is the edit history of incident reports. This is a list of employees disciplined after objecting to the treatment of guests of color. And this is the automatic preservation request for camera footage, lobby audio, internal email, and complaint logs triggered from the central system 8 minutes ago. Only then did Preston understand Ariel's question service or evidence. Margot took one step back, but Ariel turned to her before she could make herself invisible. Mrs. Sinclair, your family's event will end tonight. Not because you didn't know who I was, but because you believed not knowing who I was gave you permission to treat me as less than you. Margot tried to hold on to her elegant tone, but it shook at the end. My family helped this hotel survive difficult years. You don't understand what it means for my family to be told no in a place we practically kept alive. Ariel looked at her for a moment. There was truth in Margot's sentence, a woman trying to preserve the Sinclair family's image after her husband's death, after inheritance lawsuits, after the fear that high society would discover her power was no longer as solid as it looked. But fear did not turn privilege into dignity. I understand more than you think, Ariel replied. But a hotel is not allowed to use one person's humiliation to serve another person's fear. Preston knew he was losing both Margot and his position. The politeness dropped from his face, revealing a tired, angry, frightened man underneath. You came here because of your father. Yes. So this is revenge. No. Ariel stepped closer to him. If this were revenge, I would have fired you the moment I read the first file. I came here because I needed to know whether the system that destroyed my father was still alive. Tonight you answered that for me. She turned toward the employees gathering at the edges of the lobby front desk, clerks, bellmen, housekeepers, valets, bar staff. People who had learned to hear everything and say very little. 22 years ago, Calvin Monroe saw a VIP guest injure a housekeeper in a service hallway. The hotel asked him to sign a false statement to protect that guest. He refused, and because he would not turn the truth into an accident, he was pushed out of this building for not fitting the brand culture. No one spoke. Darius lowered his head, his eyes red. My father did not lose his job because he did something wrong, Ariel continued. He lost it because he did the right thing in a place that had learned to call the wrong thing procedure. Celeste stepped beside her. Preston Vale, you are suspended effective immediately. Your retention bonus and regional appointment recommendation are canceled under the terms of the contract. Your office will be sealed. You are not to contact staff access company systems or enter any Sterling Crest property until the investigation is complete. Preston looked around the lobby as if hoping the marble walls might take his side. You're destroying this brand, Ariel answered calmly. No, I'm finding out whether it's still worth saving. The police arrived a few minutes later at Celeste's request not to remove Ariel as Preston had expected, but to make sure no one deleted records. As Preston was escorted out, he stopped near Ariel and lowered his voice into one final cut. Your father never belonged here. Darius stepped forward, but Ariel raised a hand to stop him. She looked at Preston with eyes that no longer held anger, only truth. My father belonged in every room he entered because he carried honor with him. You've stood inside this hotel for 30 years and still don't understand what luxury is. Preston had no answer. He stepped through the revolving doors and into the rain. This time he was the one being filmed from behind. That night, Ariel did not go up to the presidential suite. She asked Darius to take her to the employee hallway. He hesitated and said it was not meant for guests. She answered softly that she was no longer a guest. They walked past the service elevators, linen carts, metal lockers, and pale beige walls that guests on the upper floors never saw. The air smelled of old coffee, laundry detergent, and the exhaustion of long shifts. Darius stopped in front of an empty space on the wall where an old picture frame had left a faint outline in the paint. This is where Mr. Calvin's photo used to hang, he said. Ariel touched the empty wall. In that moment, she was not a billionaire, not an acting chair, not the woman who had just silenced an entire hotel lobby. She was simply a daughter standing before the blank space left behind when people erased her father from their history. 1 week later, the Sterling Crest Manhattan held a ceremony in the Grand Ballroom. The press assumed it was a brand relaunch after the acquisition, but Ariel invited the employees in first housekeeping, kitchen staff, front desk bellmen, security valets, laundry maintenance. The people who came in through side doors and kept the front entrance shining. The first announcement was not about revenue. Ariel announced an independent civil rights audit across the entire company, the reopening of every downgraded complaint, a legal defense fund for service workers pressured into silence, and a management training program for capable frontline employees. Darius Bennett was the first person accepted into that program. Then she pulled the cloth from the framed photograph beside the podium. Calvin Monroe appeared in his Navy bellman's uniform, his smile gentle and steady as if he were still standing in the lobby, ready to help someone carry a suitcase heavier than they expected. Below the photograph were the words, Calvin Monroe, 30 years of service, the man who chose truth, when this hotel chose silence. The room was quiet for several seconds. Then Darius began to clap. The applause spread unevenly, not polished or polite, but heavy with all the things people had swallowed for years because they needed their jobs. Ariel looked at the faces in front of her. A hotel is not luxurious because it has marble floors, chandeliers, or a presidential suite. It is only truly luxurious when the least powerful person who walks through its doors is still treated like a human being. That night, Calvin's photograph was not placed back in the employee hallway. Ariel had it hung in the main lobby at the center of the wall, where only executives had once been displayed. Around him were photographs of housekeepers, chefs, front desk clerks, bellmen, laundry workers, guards, and valets, the people who had built the hotel from the inside. When a black couple approached the front desk to check in for their anniversary, the clerk smiled, asked for their names, confirmed their suite, and handed them the key without one unnecessary question. Ariel stood nearby. Darius, now wearing a management trainee badge, stepped up beside her. "It looks different," he said. Ariel looked at the new wall, then at the couple walking toward the elevators. "No," she said. "It looks honest. Sometimes justice does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it is simply a name asked with respect, a key handed over without suspicion, and a person once erased from history finally placed where everyone has to see him." Behind Ariel, Calvin Monroe watched over the hotel lobby he had once been forced to leave. And this time, no one could take him down again.